Welcome to Kiss and Chapters, where every story begins with a spark and ends with a swoon. If you love heart-fluttering romances, unexpected twists and characters you'll root for, you're in the right place. Don't forget to like, subscribe and hit the notification bell so I can keep bringing you more sweet, emotional and unforgettable stories. Let's fall in love with every chapter, together. Chapter 1, The Ultimatum. Molly Davenport sprawled across her velvet chaise lounge, her penthouse a kaleidoscope of half-finished canvases, spilled coffee mugs, and a ukulele she'd impulse bought last week. At 29, her life was a masterpiece of organized chaos. Paint smudges on her overalls, a half-eaten bagel balanced on a sketchbook, and a mimosa fizzing in her hand. Sunlight streamed through the floor-to-ceiling windows, catching the glitter of her latest art project, a mural of dancing flamingos. She was mid-sip when her phone buzzed and the family lawyer's name, Mr. Percival Hornsby Askew, flashed on the screen. "Molly, darling," Hornsby's voice crackled, all pomp and circumstance, "we need to discuss your grandmother's will. Urgently." Molly rolled her eyes. Grandma Beatrice had been a firecracker, leaving her a fortune to fund her art dreams. "Hornsby, I'm in the middle of a creative flow. Can't it wait?" "No, it cannot." His tone sharpened. "Your inheritance, $50 million to be precise, comes with a condition. You must be married by your 30th birthday. That's 6 weeks from today, August 12, 2025. Molly choked, spraying mimosa across the canvas. "Married? Me? That's like asking a cat to do taxes." Her laughter echoed, but Hornsby wasn't joking. The will was ironclad, drafted when Grandma Beatrice worried Molly's free-spirited ways would leave her adrift. Without the money, her art studio, her charity workshops for kids, her life, poof, gone. She hung up, pacing past a pile of glitter-dusted sneakers. Marriage? She'd rather wrestle a porcupine. Her last date had been with a poet who wrote odes to his kombucha. No, she needed a plan, and fast. That's when a memory hit her. Gabriel Bennett, the bane of her childhood, now a lawyer with a stick so far up his, well, you know. In 5th grade, he'd put gum in her ponytail during a zoo field trip, sparking a feud that lasted through high school. He was all rules and schedules. She was all paint and spontaneity. Perfect. Molly tracked him down at Bennett and Associates, a law firm so sterile it could double as a hospital. She burst into his office, ignoring the receptionist's protests, her tie-dye skirt swirling. Gabriel, in a crisp navy suit, looked up from a stack of papers, his hazel eyes narrowing. At 30, he'd traded his gangly frame for broad shoulders and a jawline that could cut glass, but his scowl was vintage 5th grade. "Molly Davenport," he said, voice flat as a spreadsheet. "What chaos have you brought to my doorstep?" She grinned, plopping into his leather chair. "Gabe, I need a husband. Fake husband, to be exact. By next month." He blinked, then adjusted his tie, a nervous tic she remembered from when she'd accidentally spilled juice on his homework. "Absolutely not. I don't do chaos, and you're a walking hurricane." "It's for $50 million, she said, leaning forward. "Grandma's will says I have to be married to inherit. We fake a marriage, I get the money, and I'll fund that pro bono legal clinic you're always whining about on LinkedIn." Gabriel's jaw tightened. He'd been trying to start a clinic for low-income families, but funding was a pipe dream. "You read my LinkedIn?" "Stalked it," she corrected, winking. "So, what do you say? Be my faux beau." He leaned back, steepling his fingers. "This is a terrible idea. You're impulsive, reckless. And you're a human filing cabinet. We balance each other out." She batted her lashes, but her heart raced. This was a long shot. Gabriel sighed, pinching the bridge of his nose. "If, and this is a big if, I agree we do this my way. Contracts, boundaries, no shenanigans." "Shenanigans are my middle name," she teased, but he was already pulling out a laptop. 2 hours later, they were hunched over a 47-page contract, bickering over clauses like, no glitter in shared spaces, Molly's veto, and no unscheduled naps, Gabriel's non-negotiable. Their voices overlapped, her laughter clashing with his exasperated sighs. "You can't dictate my snack choices." Molly protested, pointing at Clause 12.3, approved foodstuffs only. "And you can't turn my life into a circus." Gabriel shot back, his pen stabbing the air. They were nose to nose, the air crackling with their old rivalry, when Gabriel's sleeve caught on Molly's scarf, tugging it askew. He reached to fix it, his fingers brushing her collarbone. Her breath hitched and his hand froze, their eyes locking. For a split second the room felt too small, too warm. Then Molly laughed, loud and forced, breaking the spell. "Relax, Gabe, I'm not gonna bite you. Yet." She winked, but her cheeks burned. He cleared his throat, shoving the contract at her. "Sign it. We start tomorrow." Molly scrawled her name, her usual loopy flourish, and handed it back. "To our glorious fake marriage," she said, raising an imaginary glass. Gabriel muttered, "God help me," but the corner of his mouth twitched, a smile he'd deny to his grave. As Molly sashayed out, leaving a trail of glitter, Gabriel stared at the contract, wondering what he'd just signed up for. Molly, meanwhile, skipped to her car, heart pounding. This was going to be a disaster, or the most fun she'd had in years. Chapter 2: The Ring in the Ruckus. Molly Davenport stood in the middle of Sparkle and Shine Jewelers, her tie-dye scarf clashing gloriously with the store's polished glass cases. She held up a diamond ring the size of a gumball, its facets catching the light like a disco ball. "This one screams, Molly Davenport, future heiress," she declared, grinning at Gabriel Bennett, who looked like he'd rather be auditing tax forms than shopping for engagement rings. Gabriel, in a gray suit that screamed, "I iron my socks," pinched the bridge of his nose. "Molly, that ring costs more than my car. We're faking this, remember? Something sensible. Understated." He pointed to a plain gold band so boring it could have been a paperweight. "Sensible?" Molly gasped, clutching her chest. "Gabe, we need pizzazz. My family will sniff out a fake faster than you can say, prenup. Grandma Beatrice once fired a chef for using margarine instead of butter." She twirled the gaudy ring on her finger, striking a pose. "This is believable." Gabriel's jaw ticked, a telltale sign he was one step from drafting a cease and desist for her theatrics. "It's impractical. Clause 7.2 of our contract. All purchases must be mutually approved." He waved the 47-page document he'd insisted on bringing because of course he did. Molly rolled her eyes but relented, sensing a stalemate. After 20 minutes of bickering, her pushing for Sparkle him for budget, they settled on a simple silver band with a tiny emerald, a nod to Molly's love for green paint. As the clerk engraved it, she leaned close, her elbow brushing Gabriel's. "Admit it, you like the emerald. It's got flair." He adjusted his tie, avoiding her gaze. "It's adequate." The clerk, a bubbly woman named Tina, handed over the ring with a dreamy sigh. "You two are so cute. How long have you been in love?" Molly, never one to miss a cue, flung her arms around Gabriel's neck, nearly toppling him. "Oh, Tina, since he swept me off my feet with his legal jargon." She batted her lashes, her cheek pressed to his stiff shoulder. Gabriel froze, his face turning the color of a ripe tomato. "Molly," he hissed, Clause 9.1, no unapproved physical contact in public. "Lighten up, fiancé," she whispered, patting his chest before stepping back. Tina cooed, oblivious, and Molly slipped the ring on, wiggling her fingers. Gabriel's eyes lingered on her hand a beat too long, and Molly's stomach did a weird flip. She chalked it up to the 3 espressos she'd had that morning. Next up, selling the engagement to her nosy cousins. Molly had a plan: stage a public proposal at Brew and Bliss, the trendiest cafe in town, where her cousin Mandy was sure to be sipping oat milk lattes. They arrived at noon, the place buzzing with hipsters and avocado toast. Gabriel, clutching his briefcase like a shield, scanned the room. "This is a terrible idea. Too many variables." "Variables? Gabe, it's a cafe, not a courtroom." Molly adjusted her floppy hat, spotting Mandy's neon scrunchie across the room. "Showtime." Before Gabriel could protest, Molly nudged him to one knee. He fumbled the ring box, muttering about breach of contract, but managed a stiff, "Molly Davenport, will you marry me?" Molly threw her hands to her cheeks, channeling every rom-com she'd ever seen. "Oh, Gabriel, yes," she squealed loud enough to turn heads. She yanked him up, planting a dramatic kiss on his cheek. The cafe erupted in claps and Mandy's jaw dropped, her phone already recording. Gabriel, red-faced, whispered, "You're overdoing it." "Underdoing it is worse," she shot back, beaming for the crowd. Then disaster struck. The ring slipped from Gabriel's sweaty palm, skittering under a table. "Oh crap," Molly yelped, diving after it. Gabriel, cursing under his breath, joined her, their heads bumping as they crawled among coffee-stained floorboards. Clause 14.5. Maintain dignity in public, he grumbled, fishing the ring from a dust bunny. Molly snorted, grabbing his tie to tug him closer. Dignity's overrated, counselor. Their faces were inches apart, her breath catching at his hazel eyes, now soft with something she couldn't place. They scrambled up, ring retrieved, and Molly laughed it off, but her heart was doing that flip thing again. That evening they faced the real test. Dinner with Aunt Beatrice, Grandma's sister and the family's resident skeptic. Her townhouse was a shrine to doilies and disapproval, and she eyed Gabriel like he was a counterfeit bill. "So," she said, slicing her salmon with surgical precision, "how did you two fall in love?" Molly launched into a wild tale of love at first sight, during a fictional vineyard tour, complete with a made-up story about Gabriel saving her from a runaway grape cart. Gabriel choked on his water, shooting her a look that screamed, "You're insane." He countered with a dry, "Actually, it was a gradual appreciation of her unique qualities," sticking to their rehearsed script. Aunt Beatrice's eyes narrowed. "Prove it." "Kiss." Molly froze, her fork halfway to her mouth. Gabriel's hand tightened around his napkin, his Adam's apple bobbing. "Auntie, we're not big on PD," Molly tried, but Beatrice's glare could have melted steel. "Do it or I'll know you're lying," she said. Gabriel leaned in, his movements robotic, and aimed for Molly's lips. At the last second he veered, landing a clumsy peck on her nose. Molly yelped, then burst into giggles, covering her face. "Oh Gabe, you romantic fool." Beatrice frowned but let it slide, muttering about modern couples. Molly kicked Gabriel under the table, whispering, "Nose? Really?" "It was a strategic miscalculation," he hissed back, but his ears were pink. As they left, Molly looped her arm through his, partly for show, partly because it felt nice. Gabriel stiffened but didn't pull away, and when their hands brushed, neither moved to break the contact. Back at her penthouse, Molly flopped onto her couch, ring glinting on her finger. "We pulled it off, Gabe. We're basically Oscar-worthy." Gabriel, loosening his tie, gave her a rare half-smile. "We survived." "Barely." He paused, then added, "You're exhausting, you know that? And you're a human snooze button," she shot back, tossing a pillow at him. But as he caught it, their eyes met and Molly felt that pesky flip again. She turned away, blaming the wine. Gabriel, meanwhile, stared at the ring on her finger, wondering why his pulse was racing. This was just a contract, right? Chapter 3. Moving in, freaking out. Molly Davenport's penthouse was a technicolor disaster zone. Paint-splattered canvases leaned against walls, a ukulele teetered on a stack of takeout containers, and a half-finished mural of a peacock glowed under fairy lights. She was sprawled on a beanbag, sketching a cartoon of Gabriel Bennett in a suit made of graph paper when the doorbell buzzed. Gabriel stood outside, clutching a suitcase so neatly packed it could have been a Tetris champion's masterpiece. His tie was knotted to military precision, and his hazel eyes scanned the hallway like he was expecting an ambush. "Molly, this is a logistical nightmare," he said, stepping inside and nearly tripping over a pile of glitter-dusted flip-flops. "We agreed to cohabitate for appearances, Clause 3.1, but this," he gestured at the chaos. "This violates Clause 8.2, maintain a habitable shared space." Molly grinned, tossing her sketchpad aside. "Gabe, relax. It's not chaos, it's creative ambience." She hopped up, her tie-dye skirt swirling, and handed him a mug of questionable origin. "Tea? Or are you allergic to fun?" He eyed the mug like it might bite. "Is this clean?" "Probably." She winked and he sighed, setting it down with a grimace. To sell their fake engagement to her family, Gabriel had agreed to move in for the next 5 weeks until Molly's 30th birthday. His own apartment, a minimalist shrine to beige and right angles, was too far from the Davenport family's radar, and Aunt Beatrice had already hinted at surprise visits. But as Gabriel surveyed Molly's penthouse, where a lava lamp bubbled next to a stack of pizza boxes, he looked like he'd rather negotiate a hostage crisis. "This won't work," he said, opening his suitcase to reveal color-coded folders and a single pair of loafers. "I need order. Schedules." "No." He picked up a glittery sock. "Whatever this is." Molly snatched the sock, tossing it into a pile of paintbrushes. "Lighten up, counselor. You're in my courtroom now." She flopped onto the couch, patting the spot next to her. Sit. Let's make a house rules list. Gabriel produced a legal pad naturally and they spent an hour bickering. Molly proposed mandatory dance parties. Gabriel countered with no unsanctioned glitter usage. When she suggested Taco Tuesdays, he added mandatory vegetable consumption. Their voices overlapped, her laughter clashing with his exasperated huffs. You can't ban glitter. Molly protested, waving a sparkly pen. It's my emotional support medium. And you can't turn my life into a craft store explosion. Gabriel shot back, but his lips twitched, betraying a smile. The tension broke when a neighbor, Mrs. Kowalski, banged on the door, complaining about newlywed noise. Molly, quick on her feet, flung her arms around Gabriel, cooing, "Oh honey, we're just so in love." Gabriel stiffened, his face a mix of horror and tomato-red embarrassment, but he played along, muttering, "Yes darling, we're ecstatic." Mrs. Kowalski softened, handing them a fruitcake for the happy couple. As the door closed, Molly doubled over laughing. "You should have seen your face. Ecstatic? You sounded like you were pleading the fifth." Clause 10.3. No mocking the other party's performance, Gabriel grumbled, but he was fighting a grin. The real test came that afternoon. A grocery run to stock their shared kitchen. At the supermarket, Molly tossed gummy worms and neon cereal into the cart, while Gabriel added kale and quinoa with the precision of a bomb squad technician. They hit a snag over a box of Lucky Charms, Molly tugging one end, Gabriel the other. "These are 90% sugar," Gabriel said, brandishing the box like evidence. "And 100% joy," Molly countered, yanking it back. Their tug-of-war drew stares from shoppers, and when an elderly woman whispered, "Young love," Molly leaned into it, looping her arm through Gabriel's. "Gabe? We're convincing," she said, loud enough for the woman to hear. Gabriel's ears turned pink, but he didn't pull away, his arm oddly warm against hers. Back at the penthouse, Molly decided to escalate their roommate dynamic with a prank. While Gabriel unpacked his suits, each wrapped in plastic like museum artifacts, she hid his precious ties in a pile of glittery yarn. He discovered the sabotage that evening, pulling out a navy tie that sparkled like a disco ball. "Molly," he roared, storming into the living room. "This is a violation of Clause 15.7, no tampering with personal property." She cackled, sprawled on the floor with a paintbrush in her hair. "You look like you're auditioning for a Vegas show." He retaliated by organizing her paintbrushes by color and size, lining them up on her easel like soldiers. "There," he said, dusting his hands. "Now your chaos has structure." Molly gasped, clutching her chest. "You monster. My brushes were in creative disarray." But she was laughing, and when she flicked paint at him, landing a blue speck on his cheek, he froze, then shockingly laughed too. It was a rare warm sound that made Molly's stomach do that annoying flip again. That night they declared a truce for a couple's movie night to practice their act. Molly picked a rom-com, naturally, while Gabriel suggested a documentary on tax law. They compromised on The Princess Bride, settling on the couch with a bowl of popcorn Molly had doused in hot sauce. Halfway through she dozed off, her head lolling onto Gabriel's shoulder. He froze, heart hammering, her curls tickling his chin. She smelled like paint and lavender, and he couldn't decide if he was annoyed or something else. He should have nudged her awake. Clause 9.1, no unapproved physical contact, but instead he grabbed a throw blanket, draping it over her. Her soft snore was oddly endearing, and he caught himself staring at her freckled nose, lit by the TV's glow. "This is a terrible idea," he muttered, but he didn't move. Molly, stirring slightly, mumbled, "You're not so bad, Gabe," in her sleep. His breath caught, and he spent the rest of the movie pretending his pulse wasn't racing. When she woke, stretching like a cat, she grinned at him. "Good flick, right?" "Acceptable," he said, voice tight, and busied himself folding the blanket with military precision. As they said goodnight, Molly heading to her room and Gabriel to the guest suite, she paused. "Hey Gabe. Thanks for the blanket. Didn't know you had a soft side." "It was a practical decision," he said, adjusting his glasses. "You looked cold." She smirked, saluting. "Sure thing, counselor." But as she closed her door, her heart was doing that flip again, and she wondered if living with Gabriel was going to be more complicated than their contract. Gabriel, staring at his neatly made bed, had the same thought, his tie still faintly glittering in the moonlight. The family barbecue. Molly Davenport twirled in her sundress, a riot of sunflowers that clashed spectacularly with the manicured lawn of her family's estate. The Davenport annual barbecue was in full swing, with aunts, uncles and cousins milling about, plates piled high with ribs and potato salad. A string quartet played under a gazebo, but Molly's eyes were on Gabriel Bennett, who looked like he'd rather be deposed in court than navigate this chaos. His navy blazer and pressed khakis screamed, "I have a 401k," and he clutched a water bottle like it was his only lifeline. "Molly, this is a logistical disaster," Gabriel muttered, sidestepping a toddler wielding a ketchup-soaked hot dog. "Too many variables. Too many Davenports." "Gabe, it's a barbecue, not a military tribunal," Molly said, adjusting her floppy hat. "We're here to sell our engagement. Smile or Aunt Beatrice will smell a rat." She grabbed his arm, dragging him toward the buffet, her touch sending an unexpected jolt through him. The mission was critical. Convince her eccentric family their engagement was real, or risk losing the $50 million inheritance tied to Molly's 30th birthday, now 4 weeks away. Aunt Beatrice, the family's self-appointed lie detector, was already squinting at them from across the lawn, her pearls gleaming with suspicion. They started with Uncle Ted, a retired magician who carried a pet parrot named Houdini on his shoulder. "So, Gabriel," Ted boomed, tossing a corncob like a magic wand, "how'd you win our Molly's heart?" Gabriel cleared his throat, reciting their rehearsed backstory like a legal brief. "We reconnected at a charity event. I was impressed by her dedication to art. Our relationship developed over shared values." His delivery was stiffer than the picnic tables, and Houdini squawked as if in protest. Molly, sensing a fumble, jumped in. "Oh, Teddy, it was magical. Gabe took me on this hot air balloon date and we floated over vineyards at sunset. He even sang to me." She elbowed Gabriel, who choked on his water. "Sang?" Ted's eyes lit up. "Let's hear it, son." Gabriel shot Molly a look that could have curdled the coleslaw. "I don't sing," he said, but Molly's grin was relentless. "Go on, honey," she cooed loud enough for nearby cousins to hear. "Sing our song." Gabriel's jaw ticked, but he muttered a flat, "Happy birthday to you," under his breath, earning a laugh from Ted and a cackle from Molly. "You're killing me," he whispered to her, but his lips twitched, betraying a smile. Next up was Cousin Mandy, the family's astrology guru, who cornered them by the lemonade stand. "Your auras are wild," she said, waving a sage bundle. "Sagittarius and Virgo, right? Total opposites. Spill the tea, how's the bedroom vibe?" Molly nearly spat out her lemonade, while Gabriel turned the color of the watermelon slices. "Mandy, we're keeping it chill," Molly said, looping her arm through Gabriel's for show. His bicep tensed under her fingers and she noticed, against her will, how solid it felt. "Gabe's all about restraint. Clause 11.2, no inappropriate disclosures," Gabriel muttered, but Mandy was already reading their palms, predicting cosmic passion. Molly giggled, but Gabriel's ears stayed pink, and she wondered if he was imagining the same passion she was trying not to. The real test came when Aunt Beatrice summoned them to the gazebo for interrogation. "Your engagement seems sudden," she said, her eyes like laser pointers. "Tell me about your first date." Molly launched into a tale of a fictional stargazing picnic, complete with a made-up meteor shower. "Gabe pointed out every constellation and I fell for his nerdy charm," she said, patting his cheek. Gabriel stiffened, but his hand brushed hers, sending a spark up her arm. He added, Molly's spontaneity was refreshing, sticking to their script but sounding oddly sincere. Beatrice's frown softened, but then she dropped the bomb. "Dance. No. Prove you're in love." Molly froze, her sundress suddenly feeling too flimsy under Beatrice's gaze. Gabriel, equally panicked, adjusted his tie, his nervous tick. "Auntie, we're not big on PD," Molly tried, but Beatrice crossed her arms. "Dance or I'll call Hornsby about that will," she said. The quartet struck up a slow waltz and Gabriel, with the grace of a malfunctioning robot, offered his hand. "Let's get this over with," he muttered. Molly took it, her pulse doing an annoying skip as his fingers closed around hers. They stepped onto the grass, fairy lights twinkling above, and promptly botched it. Gabriel trod on her toes and Molly yelped, giggling despite herself. "You're a menace," she whispered, but her laughter eased his scowl. He pulled her closer to avoid a rogue volleyball and they found a rhythm, clumsy but functional. Her sundress brushed his legs and his hand settled on her waist, warm and steady. For a moment under the twinkling lights it felt real. "You're not terrible at this," Molly teased, her cheek near his shoulder. He smelled like cedar and soap and she hated how much she liked it. "Don't get used to it," he said, but his voice was soft and his thumb grazed her back, sending a shiver down her spine. The song ended and they stepped apart, both a little breathless. The family clapped and Beatrice nodded grudgingly, but Molly's heart was still waltzing. The mood shifted when a new guest arrived. Jake, Molly's ex, a charming but unreliable photographer who'd once ghosted her after a 6-month fling. He sauntered over, all dimples and leather jacket, and hugged Molly a beat too long. "Heard you're engaged, Malls. Didn't think you'd settle for a suit." Gabriel's jaw tightened and before Molly could respond he slid an arm around her waist, pulling her close. "She didn't settle," he said, his voice low but sharp. "She chose someone who shows up." Jake raised an eyebrow, smirking, but backed off. Molly's heart did that flip thing again and she leaned into Gabriel, playing it up but also not. "My hero," she teased, nudging him, but her voice was softer than she meant. As Jake slunk away, Gabriel's arm stayed put and Molly didn't mind. They grabbed dessert, her with a slice of pie, him with a single strawberry, and sat on a picnic blanket. "You didn't have to go all caveman," she said, licking whipped cream off her thumb. "He was out of line," Gabriel said, his eyes on the strawberry like it held the secrets of the universe. Clause 13.4. Protect the integrity of the arrangement. Molly laughed, but when a leaf landed in her hair, Gabriel reached out, his fingers brushing her temple as he plucked it free. Their eyes locked and the air felt charged, like the moment before a summer storm. "Thanks," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. He cleared his throat, dropping his hand. "It was practical." "Sure," she said, grinning, but her heart was racing. As they rejoined the party, Molly stealing a bite of his strawberry and him rolling his eyes, they both wondered, separately but simultaneously, if this fake engagement was starting to feel a little too real. Chapter 5. The Wedding Planner Woes. Molly Davenport stood in the middle of her penthouse, surrounded by fabric swatches and a mood board that looked like a unicorn had sneezed glitter all over it. Her tie-dye shirt was splattered with fresh paint from a morning art session, and she was halfway through a mango smoothie when the doorbell chimed. Enter Miss Penelope Pritchard, the wedding planner Aunt Beatrice had hired to ensure Molly's whirlwind engagement to Gabriel Bennett didn't crash and burn before her 30th birthday, now 3 weeks away. Penelope, in a crisp blazer and a bun tighter than a bank vault, clutched a tablet like it was the Constitution. "Molly, darling," Penelope said, her smile as stiff as her hairspray, "we must finalize the engagement party and wedding details. Time is of the essence." Molly grinned, tossing a swatch of neon pink tulle at Gabriel, who sat on the couch, his laptop open to a spreadsheet titled, Faux Nuptials Budget Version 3.2. He caught the tulle, his hazel eyes narrowing behind his glasses. "Molly, Clause 6.4. All event planning requires mutual consent. This," he held up the tulle like it was radioactive, "is a violation." "Gabe, it's festive," Molly said, twirling another swatch. "We need flair to sell this marriage to my family. Think taco trucks, fairy lights, maybe a piñata." Gabriel pinched the bridge of his nose, his go-to move when Molly's chaos threatened his sanity. "Taco trucks? We agreed on a string quartet and canapes." "Professional." "Understated." Penelope cleared her throat, tapping her tablet. "I've booked the grand ballroom for the engagement party next week and a cathedral for the wedding. We'll need a guest list of 200, a 5-tier cake and a dress fitting by Friday." Molly's jaw dropped. 200 people? I don't even know 200 people. And a cathedral? I'd rather get married in a bounce house. Gabriel for once nodded. A smaller venue is more fiscally responsible. Penelope's smile didn't waver, but her eyes screamed control freak. "Your aunt insists on grandeur. Now let's discuss the cake." The cake tasting was at Sweet Bliss Bakery, a pastel wonderland that smelled like sugar and dreams. Molly Dovin sampling a red velvet cupcake and smearing frosting on her cheek. Gabriel, in a navy sweater that made him look like a law professor, analyzed the flavor profiles like he was cross-examining a witness. "This vanilla is too sweet," he said, scribbling notes. The chocolate lacks depth. Molly rolled her eyes, scooping a glob of buttercream and dabbing it on his nose. Lighten up, counselor. Taste the joy. Gabriel froze, a dollop of frosting quivering on his face. Then to Molly's shock he swiped a bit of chocolate ganache and smeared it on her forehead. Joy tastes overrated, he deadpanned, but his lips twitched. Molly gasped, grabbing a piping bag and squirting a line of cream cheese frosting at him. It hit his sweater and he retaliated with a spoonful of lemon curd, landing it in her hair. The bakery staff stared horrified as the fake fiancés devolved into a full-blown food fight, laughing like kids. Molly slipped on a smear of icing and Gabriel caught her, his hands on her waist, their faces inches apart. Her heart did that annoying flip and his eyes softened, the frosting on his nose making him look absurdly adorable. Penelope, arriving to check on them, shrieked. This is undignified. You're planning a wedding, not a pie fight. Molly giggled, wiping frosting off Gabriel's cheek. Sorry, Penny. We got carried away. Gabriel cleared his throat, stepping back, but his fingers lingered on her arm a second too long. Unplanned enthusiasm, he muttered, adjusting his glasses now smudged with icing. Back at the penthouse, Penelope insisted they practice their first dance to ensure they could perform convincingly at the engagement party. Molly cranked up a playlist of cheesy love ballads, while Gabriel produced a metronome app to maintain rhythm. They cleared a space in the living room, pushing aside paint cans and Gabriel's neatly stacked legal briefs. Clause 12.1. No tripping hazards, Gabriel said, eyeing a stray ukulele. Clause fun, live a little, Molly shot back, grabbing his hands. She wore fuzzy socks and a paint-splattered tank top, her curls bouncing as she swayed to the music. Gabriel, stiff as a board, moved like he was solving a math problem. Loosen up, Gabe, Molly said, spinning herself under his arm. She misjudged the distance, tripping over a rug and pulling him down with her. They landed in a heap, her on top, his hands on her hips. For a moment neither moved, their breaths mingling, her nose brushing his chin. His cedar soap scent hit her and her heart raced. Clause 9.1. Gabriel murmured, voice low. No unapproved physical contact. Molly grinned, rolling off him but staying close. You're the one holding my hips, counselor. He sat up, red-faced, and adjusted his sweater. That was to prevent injury. Sure, she teased, but her cheeks were warm. They tried again, slower, and this time, Gabriel's hand settled on her waist, steady and warm. Molly's teasing faded and they swayed in silence, the music wrapping around them like a secret. His rare smile, small, unguarded, made her stomach flip again and she wondered why it felt so right. Penelope's call about the guest list snapped them back to reality. We need 50 more names by tomorrow, she barked through the phone. Molly groaned, flopping onto the couch while Gabriel started a spreadsheet. We'll divide and conquer, he said, but his eyes kept flicking to her, lingering on her paint-smudged cheek. That night, over takeout tacos, Molly's win, and kale salad, Gabriel's insistence, they brainstormed guests. Molly suggested her art class kids, while Gabriel listed colleagues with names like Mr. Thompson Iskew. They bickered, laughing over Molly's idea to invite her barista, who made a mean latte heart. When their hands brushed over the last taco, neither pulled away and Molly's heart skipped. As they cleaned up, Molly caught Gabriel staring at her mural. A vibrant peacock with a single meticulous feather he'd pointed out as anatomically correct. You're really talented, he said almost shyly. She blinked, caught off guard. Thanks, Gabe. Didn't know you noticed. I notice a lot, he said, then cleared his throat, retreating to his guest room with a mumbled good night. Molly stood alone, staring at the mural, her fingers tracing the emerald ring on her hand. The contract said this was fake, but the way her heart kept flipping wasn't in the fine print. Across the penthouse, Gabriel lay awake, replaying their dance, wondering why he was dreading the day their deal ended. Clause or no clause, something was shifting and neither was ready to admit it. Chapter 6, The X Factor. Molly Davenport adjusted her emerald ring, its sparkle catching the chandelier light in the grand ballroom. The engagement party, orchestrated by the relentless Penelope Pritchard, was a glittering affair. Crystal flutes, a string quartet and enough hors d'oeuvres to feed a small nation. Molly's flowy bohemian dress, a swirl of teal and gold, stood out among the sea of tailored suits and cocktail gowns. Gabriel Bennett beside her looked like he'd stepped out of a law firm ad, his charcoal suit crisp and his tie knotted with surgical precision. His hazel eyes scanned the room as if expecting a legal ambush. "Molly, stay on script," he whispered, clutching a glass of sparkling water like a lifeline. Clause 11.2. No unapproved improvisations. "Your family's watching." Molly grinned, nudging him with her elbow. "Gabe, loosen up. We're selling love, not a deposition. Smile like you mean it." She flashed a dazzling grin at a passing cousin who cooed over her ring. Gabriel's forced smile looked more like he'd bitten a lemon and Molly stifled a laugh. The party was a high-stakes performance to convince the Davenports, and especially Aunt Beatrice, that their engagement was real, securing Molly's $50 million inheritance before her 30th birthday, now 2 weeks away. They'd rehearsed their backstory. A whirlwind romance sparked at a charity gala, sealed with stargazing and bad karaoke. But as Molly chatted up her uncle, tossing in a fictional tale about Gabriel writing her a love poem, she felt his glare boring into her. "Poetry?" he hissed when they were alone by the dessert table. "That's not in the contract." "It's called flair, counselor," she said, popping a macaron in her mouth. "Keeps it believable." Before Gabriel could cite another clause, the ballroom doors swung open and in sauntered Jake, Molly's ex, all leather jacket and roguish charm. The photographer who'd ghosted her after a 6-month fling had the nerve to wink, striding over like he owned the place. "Malls, heard you're tying the knot," he said, his dimples on full display. "Didn't think you'd go for a guy who probably starches his boxers." Molly's smile froze, her heart lurching with old hurt. Jake had a knack for charming his way in then vanishing. Before she could retort, Gabriel stepped forward, sliding an arm around her waist with a possessiveness that made her breath catch. "She chose someone who doesn't bail," he said, his voice low and sharp. "Unlike some." Jake raised an eyebrow, smirking. "Defensive, huh? You sure this isn't just a rebound, Malls?" Molly laughed, leaning into Gabriel's side for show, but also because it felt steadying. "Oh Jake, I upgraded. Gabe's got staying power." She patted Gabriel's chest, feeling his heartbeat under her palm, fast and strong. His arm tightened around her and she wondered if he was acting or something else. Gabriel, seizing the moment, turned to the crowd, raising his glass. "If I may," he said, his lawyer voice cutting through the chatter. "I'd like to toast my fiancé. Molly and I met at a gala where she outbid me for a painting of a lopsided dog. I was annoyed, she was delighted. That's when I knew she was trouble." The crowd chuckled and Molly's jaw dropped at his improv. "But her passion, her chaos. It's why I fell for her." To Molly, who makes every day unpredictable. The room erupted in applause and Molly stared, stunned. "Nice ad-lib," she whispered, her voice shaky. "Didn't know you had it in you." Clause 13.4. "Protect the integrity of the arrangement," he murmured, but his eyes were soft, lingering on hers. The crowd demanded a dance and Gabriel led her to the floor, his hand warm in hers. The quartet played a slow melody and they swayed, her dress brushing his legs, his hands steady on her waist. Their chemistry crackled and Molly's heart did that infuriating flip again, especially when his thumb grazed her back. "You're not bad at this," she teased, her cheek near his shoulder. He smelled like cedar and soap and she hated how much she liked it. "Don't get used to it," he said, but his voice was low, almost intimate. The crowd assumed it was love and for a moment Molly wondered if they were right. After the dance, Jake cornered her by the balcony, his charm dialed to 11. "Malls, I messed up back then. I've changed. We could have been great, you know." His hand brushed her arm, stirring old memories of late-night talks and his fleeting promises. Molly's stomach twisted, but before she could respond, Gabriel appeared, his jaw tight. "Everything okay?" he asked, his tone clipped but his eyes searching hers. "Yeah, just catching up," she said, stepping closer to him. Jake smirked and backed off, but the encounter left Molly rattled. She and Gabriel found a quiet corner, sitting with takeout sliders from a food truck Molly had snuck in, defying Penelope's no street food rule. "Jake's a jerk," she said, picking at a fry. "He broke my heart, you know. Left without a word after 6 months. I thought I was over it, but..." Gabriel hesitated, then set down his slider. "I get it. My ex-fiancée, Laura, called off our engagement 2 years ago. Said I was too rigid, too focused on work. It stung." His voice was quiet, vulnerable, and Molly's chest ached at the admission. "Laura's loss," she said, nudging him. "You're not that rigid. I mean, you survived my glitter prank." He chuckled, a rare warm sound. "And you survived my tie sabotage. Remember when you glued my locker shut in high school?" Molly laughed, the tension easing. "You deserved it after the gum in my hair incident." They swapped stories of their teenage feud, laughing over her sneaking a frog into his backpack and him reporting her for unauthorized hallway sprinting. The air felt lighter, their shoulders brushing as they leaned closer. When a breeze made Molly shiver, Gabriel shrugged off his jacket, draping it over her shoulders. His fingers brushed her neck and she froze, her pulse racing. "Thanks," she said, her voice soft. He tucked a stray curl behind her ear, his touch lingering, and her heart flipped so hard she thought it might somersault out of her chest. "Practical gesture," he said, but his eyes betrayed something warmer. "Can't have you catching a cold before the wedding." "Right. Method acting," she teased, but her voice was breathy. They sat in silence, the city lights twinkling below, and Molly wondered if she was imagining the spark between them. Gabriel, staring at her ring, felt the same pull but shoved it down, blaming the champagne he hadn't even drunk. As they rejoined the party, Molly stealing a bite of his slider and him rolling his eyes, both pretended everything was normal. But the contract, with its neat clauses, felt like a flimsy shield against the feelings creeping in. Jake's reappearance had shaken Molly, but Gabriel's steady presence, and that jacket moment, made her wonder if this fake engagement was rewriting her heart's script. Chapter 7, The Weekend Getaway. Molly Davenport's suitcase looked like it had been packed by a toddler on a sugar high. Paintbrushes poked out of a side pocket, a tie-dye scarf dangled, and a bag of gummy worms was stuffed in for emergencies. She stood in the penthouse, her curls bouncing as she zipped it shut, while Gabriel Bennett, in a pressed polo and khakis, checked his duffel bag's contents against a laminated packing list. His hazel eyes narrowed at her luggage. "Molly, Clause 5.3. Travel preparations must be practical. That suitcase is a liability." "Gabe, it's a weekend getaway, not a NASA mission," Molly said, tossing a glittery sunglass case into her bag. "We're selling our engagement, not invading a country." The getaway was Penelope Pritchard's latest demand, a couple's retreat in the Blue Ridge Mountains, designed to strengthen their bond and convince Aunt Beatrice their engagement was real. With Molly's 30th birthday and the $50 million inheritance 10 days away, they couldn't say no. The retreat promised trust exercises, romantic dinners, and cabins with suspiciously few beds, which made Gabriel clutch his contract like a security blanket. They arrived at the Misty Pines Retreat Center, a rustic haven of pine trees and fairy lights, where couples in matching sweaters cooed over heart-shaped waffles. The coordinator, a peppy woman named Harmony, handed them a schedule packed with activities like blindfolded trust hikes and love story campfires. Gabriel scanned it, muttering, "This violates Clause 12.1. No unscheduled emotional exposure." Molly grinned, nudging him. "Lighten up, counselor. Maybe you'll discover your inner romantic." "Doubtful," he said, but his lips twitched as she stuck a daisy behind her ear. Their first activity was a blindfolded hike, where one partner led the other through a forest trail. Molly, blindfolded first, flailed dramatically, grabbing Gabriel's arm. "Gabe, if you lead me into a tree, I'm amending the contract to include daily glitter showers." He guided her with the precision of a GPS, his hand steady on her elbow. "I'd rather face a malpractice suit," he said, but his voice was soft, and when her fingers brushed his, he didn't pull away. On the reverse, Molly led blindfolded Gabriel, deliberately steering him toward a mud puddle. He yelped, slipping, and she caught him, laughing as they both stumbled into the dirt. Clause 9.2. No intentional sabotage, he grumbled, wiping mud off his khakis. "You're cute when you're muddy," she teased, smearing a streak on his cheek. His scowl softened, and for a second their eyes locked, her heart doing that infuriating flip. The afternoon brought a canoe race across a glassy lake. Molly, in a life jacket that clashed with her rainbow shorts, paddled like she was swatting flies, while Gabriel rowed with metronomic precision. "Sync up, Molly," he called as their canoe veered left. "Chill, Gabe, it's not the Olympics," she shot back, splashing him with her paddle. Their bickering tipped the canoe and they plunged into the lake, emerging soaked and laughing. They swam to shore, collapsing in a heap of wet clothes and tangled limbs. Molly's curls dripped onto Gabriel's face, and his hand rested on her waist, neither moving as the sun warmed their skin. "You're a hazard," he said, but his smile was unguarded and Molly's breath caught at how it lit up his face. "And you're secretly fun," she said, poking his chest. They dried off, sharing a towel, their fingers brushing in a way that felt less accidental each time. That evening, the retreat's campfire session required couples to share their love story. Molly and Gabriel sat on a log, her in an oversized sweater, him in a somehow still crisp button-down. Harmony handed them a marshmallow stick, beaming. "Tell us how you fell in love." Molly launched into their rehearsed tale, weaving a story of stargazing and Gabriel's terrible karaoke. "He sang Bohemian Rhapsody off and I was smitten," she said, winking at him. The crowd laughed and Gabriel, to her shock, played along. "She tripped over a telescope and still looked radiant," he said, his voice steady but his eyes warm. "I knew she was trouble, but the best kind." The other couple sighed and Molly's heart skipped, unsure if he was acting or not. Their story was so convincing that Harmony teared up, and Molly leaned into Gabriel, her shoulder against his. "You're getting good at this," she whispered. "Method acting," he murmured, but his hand rested on her knee, sending a spark up her spine. The real challenge came when they reached their cabin. One cozy room, one bed, and a fireplace that screamed romance. Gabriel stared at the bed like it was a legal brief he couldn't decipher. "This violates Clause 10.4, separate sleeping arrangements." Molly laughed, tossing a pillow at him. "Relax, we'll build a pillow fort. Like kids at a sleepover." They constructed a lopsided barrier of cushions, but as they settled in, the firelight casting shadows, the cabin felt too small, too warm. Molly, in her paint-splattered pajamas, sprawled on her side while Gabriel, in a t-shirt and sweatpants, lay rigid, staring at the ceiling. "Gabe, you awake?" she whispered, unable to sleep. "Unfortunately," he said, turning to face her. The pillow walls sagged and their eyes met, inches apart. "What's keeping you up?" She hesitated, then said, "This feels real sometimes. You ever think that?" He swallowed, his Adam's apple bobbing. "It's the contract. Structure creates illusion." But his voice wavered, and when Molly shivered, he grabbed a blanket, draping it over her. His fingers brushed her shoulder, lingering, and her heart flipped so hard she thought he'd hear it. "Thanks," she said, her voice soft. "You're not as stuffy as I thought." "You're still a hurricane," he said, but his smile was warm and he didn't move his hand. They talked into the night, her dreams of a bigger art studio, his goal to fund his legal clinic. She confessed her fear of losing her spark, and he admitted he envied her freedom. "You're not trapped, Gabe," she said, yawning. "You just need to let go sometimes." He didn't respond, but as she drifted off, he watched her, her curls glowing in the firelight. He adjusted the blanket, his fingers grazing her cheek, and muttered, "This is a terrible idea." But he didn't mean the contract. The next morning they packed up, bickering over who'd eaten the last gummy worm, Molly, and who'd folded the blankets wrong, Gabriel. As they boarded the retreat's shuttle, Molly stole his baseball cap, plopping it on her head. "Looks better on me," she said, grinning. "Clause 15.7. No tampering with personal property," he said, but he let her keep it, his heart doing a flip of its own. The retreat had been a performance, but the quiet moments, the blanket, the campfire, the canoe, felt like something neither could write into a contract. As they headed back to the city, Molly wondered if she was falling for her fake fiancé, and Gabriel, clutching his packing list, wondered the same. Chapter 8, The Crack in the Facade. Molly Davenport's penthouse was a whirlwind of paint cans and takeout containers, but the tension in the air was thicker than her latest mural. With her 30th birthday and the $50 million inheritance just a week away, the fake engagement with Gabriel Bennett was starting to feel like a tightrope walk over a glitter-filled abyss. Molly, in a paint-splattered smock, was sketching a chaotic abstract piece when Gabriel stormed in, his navy suit pristine despite the late hour. He waved his phone, displaying a calendar alert for a Davenport family tea party that overlapped with Molly's art show opening. "Molly, this violates Clause 4.2. Prioritize joint appearances," he said, his hazel eyes flashing behind his glasses. "You scheduled your art show without consulting me. We need to be at that tea to sell this engagement." Molly tossed her paintbrush into a jar, splattering turquoise on her cheek. Gabe, it's my first solo show in years. I can't miss it. Art is my soul, not some footnote in your spreadsheet. He pinched the bridge of his nose, his go-to when her chaos tested his sanity. Your soul won't inherit $50 million if Aunt Beatrice sniffs out our charade. This is irresponsible. Irresponsible. Molly snapped, hands on hips. You're married to your planner, Gabe. Not everything fits in your color-coded world. Her voice cracked and she turned away, pretending to adjust a canvas. The truth was, the show was her chance to prove she was more than a carefree heiress, and his disapproval stung. Gabriel opened his mouth, then closed it, his jaw tight. Fine. We'll figure it out. He stormed to the guest room, slamming the door with a thud that echoed through the penthouse. For the next 2 days they barely spoke, communicating via sticky notes on the fridge. By Milkem, and Clause 8.2. Keep kitchen tidy G. The silence was louder than their usual bickering, and Molly hated how much it hurt. The art show was a disaster waiting to happen. On opening night, Molly stood in the gallery, her vibrant paintings lining the walls like a fever dream. Her dress, a flowy mix of purples and greens, matched the chaos of her work, but her smile was forced. A critic, some snooty guy named Reginald Voss, tore into her pieces, calling them juvenile and lacking discipline. The words hit like a punch and Molly's confidence crumbled. She slipped into the back room, fighting tears, when the door creaked open. Gabriel stood there holding 2 coffees, his tie slightly askew, a rare sign of disarray. I read your art blog, he said, handing her a cup. You wrote about how painting saved you after your parents' divorce. Voss is an idiot. Your work's alive. It's you. Molly blinked, stunned. You read my blog? Since when do you care about my chaos? He shrugged, looking at his shoes. Since I started living in it. Look, I'm sorry about the tea thing. I was overly rigid. His voice softened and he stepped closer, his cedron soap scent grounding her. You're not juvenile. You're brilliant. Her throat tightened and she managed a shaky laugh. Careful, Gabe, that's almost a compliment. It's a fact, he said, his eyes meeting hers, steady and warm. Her heart did that infuriating flip, and for a moment the gallery's hum faded, leaving just them. Molly wiped her eyes, smudging her mascara. Thanks, Gabe. I need this show to work. It's not about the money, it's about proving I'm enough. You are, he said so quietly she almost missed it. Then he straightened, slipping into lawyer mode. We can still save this. I'll charm Voss. You work the crowd. They split up, a team for the first time. Molly mingled, her charm in overdrive as she spun stories about her paintings, winning over skeptical buyers. Gabriel, meanwhile, cornered Voss, using his courtroom finesse to flatter the critic's discerning taste, while subtly suggesting a second look. By the end of the night, Voss published a retraction, calling Molly's work boldly unorthodox, and 2 paintings sold for 5 figures. Molly, buzzing with relief, hugged Gabriel without thinking, her arms tight around his neck. Clause 9.1, he mumbled, but his arms circled her waist, holding her a beat longer than necessary. You're my hero, counselor, she teased, pulling back, but her cheeks were warm and his smile, rare and genuine, made her stomach flip again. They celebrated at a greasy diner, splitting a basket of fries over chipped formica. Molly, still in her gallery dress, dipped a fry in ketchup, her ring glinting under the fluorescent lights. Hey Spill, she said. Why do you care so much about this fake marriage? It's not just about your legal clinic, is it? Gabriel hesitated, poking at a fry. Security. My parents lost everything in a bad investment when I was a kid. I learned early that order means stability. This deal, it's a way to control the chaos, to make sure my clinic happens. But you, he looked up, his eyes soft. You make me question if control's all it's cracked up to be. Molly's heart skipped and she leaned forward, her voice gentle. I'm scared too, you know. Of losing my spark, of being caged by this inheritance. But you make me feel braver. Their hands brushed over the fries and neither pulled away. The air crackled and Molly's pulse raced as Gabriel's fingers lingered, warm against hers. This isn't in the contract, he said almost to himself. Nope, she said, grinning, but her voice was shaky. Maybe we need an amendment. They laughed, the tension easing, but the moment lingered, heavy with unspoken possibilities. Gabriel paid the bill, insisting on fiscal responsibility, And Molly stole his last fry, earning an eye roll and a smile. As they walked back to the penthouse, the city lights casting shadows, Molly bumped his shoulder playfully. "You're not so bad, Gabe," she said, her tone light but her eyes searching. "You're still a hurricane," he replied, but he bumped her shoulder back, his hand brushing hers. Neither mentioned the tea party they'd skipped or the contract, or the way their fingers stayed close, almost touching all the way home. Back at the penthouse, Molly returned to her mural, adding a new stroke, a bold line that felt like Gabriel's steady presence. He watched from the couch, his laptop closed for once, and didn't complain about the paint fumes. As Molly painted, she wondered if the crack in their facade was letting something real slip through. Gabriel, staring at her ring, had the same thought, his heart racing in a way no claws could explain. Chapter 9, The Almost Wedding. Molly Davenport stood in the cathedral's dressing room, her reflection a vision in white lace and tulle. The wedding gown, chosen by Penelope Pritchard, hugged her curves before flowing into a train that sparkled like her emerald ring. Her curls were pinned up, a few escaping to frame her freckled face, and she felt like a painting, beautiful but unreal. Today was the day, the fake wedding to Gabriel Bennett, meant to secure her $50 million inheritance by her 30th birthday tomorrow. But as she adjusted her veil, her heart pounded, not from nerves about the charade, but from the fear of losing Gabriel when it ended. Across the cathedral, Gabriel tugged at his tuxedo's bow tie, his hazel eyes staring into a mirror as if it held the answers to his jumbled thoughts. The past weeks, Molly's laughter, her paint-splattered chaos, their quiet diner moments, had cracked his carefully ordered world. He'd signed a 47-page contract for a fake marriage, but the feelings stirring in his chest weren't in the fine print. He straightened, muttering, "Clause 1.1, maintain professional detachment." It sounded hollow even to him. The cathedral buzzed with Davenports, their whispers echoing off stained-glass windows. Aunt Beatrice, in a hat that rivaled a satellite dish, watched like a hawk, while Cousin Mandy predicted cosmic harmony, based on their star signs. Penelope flitted about, barking orders at florists arranging roses the size of cabbages. Molly, peeking from the dressing room, spotted Gabriel across the aisle, his broad shoulders filling out the tux. Her stomach did that infuriating flip, and she wondered when he'd gone from childhood nemesis to guy who makes my heart race. The ceremony began, a blur of organ music and rustling silk. Molly walked down the aisle, her arm looped through Uncle Ted's, who winked and whispered, "Houdini approves." She grinned, but her eyes locked on Gabriel standing at the altar, his usual stoicism softened by something she couldn't name. He looked nervous but not in a bad way, and when their gazes met, her breath caught. The officiant, a kindly man with a penchant for long-winded metaphors, droned about love's eternal flame. Molly and Gabriel had agreed to write their own vows, fake of course but convincing. Molly went first, clutching a crumpled note card she'd scribbled on that morning. "Gabe," she said, her voice steady despite her racing pulse, "I promise to mess up your spreadsheets, to sneak gummy worms into your kale smoothies, and to make every day a little less predictable. You're my anchor even when I'm a hurricane." The crowd chuckled, but her words felt too real, and Gabriel's eyes widened, searching hers. He cleared his throat, unfolding a neatly typed sheet, because of course he typed his vows. "Molly," he said, his voice low but clear, "I promise to catch you when you fall, to tolerate your glitter disasters, and to make room for your chaos in my life. You've shown me there's strength in letting go." His tone was steady, but his hands trembled, and the crowd sighed, some dabbing tears. Molly's heart flipped so hard she thought it might burst. Those weren't just words. They were true, and the realization hit her like a paint splatter. She was falling for him. Gabriel, swallowing hard, felt the same, his lawyerly resolve crumbling under her gaze. They exchanged rings, the emerald band sliding onto her finger, a matching one onto his. The officiant pronounced them husband and wife, and the crowd cheered, but when he said, "You may kiss," Molly froze. They'd practiced everything but this, agreeing to a quick peck for show. Gabriel leaned in, his breath warm, and their lips met, soft, tentative, then deepening into something neither expected. Her hands found his chest, his fingers cupped her face, and the kiss lingered, electric and real, until the crowd's whoops snapped them back. Molly pulled back, cheeks flushed, and whispered, "That wasn't in the contract." Gabriel, equally dazed, murmured, "Breach of Clause 9.1. But his smile was unguarded, and her heart raced as they turned to face the cheering Davenports. The reception in the cathedral's banquet hall was a whirlwind of toasts and twirling. Molly, high on adrenaline, dragged Gabriel to the dance floor for their first dance to a cheesy love ballad. She swayed, her gown brushing his legs, and he held her close, less stiff than at the barbecue. "You're not bad at this, counselor," she teased, her cheek near his shoulder. "Don't get used to it," he said, but his hand tightened on her waist, and when she tripped slightly he caught her, their faces inches apart. The crowd assumed it was love, and Molly, heart pounding, wasn't so sure they were wrong. As they cut the cake, a 5-tier monstrosity Penelope insisted on, Molly smeared frosting on Gabriel's cheek, earning a laugh and a retaliatory dab on her nose. Their playful banter felt effortless, but the weight of their kiss hung between them. During a slow dance, Molly, emboldened by champagne in the moment, leaned up and whispered, "What if this wasn't fake?" Gabriel froze, his hand stilling on her back. For a heartbeat she thought he'd pull away, cite a clause, but his eyes softened, searching hers. "Molly, I've been falling for you since you smeared frosting on me at the bakery. Maybe before." His voice was quiet, raw, and her breath caught. Before she could respond, Mr. Hornsby, the family lawyer, interrupted, his mustache twitching. "A word, please." He led them to a quiet corner, his briefcase stuffed with papers. "There's a complication with the will. It requires a year-long marriage to secure the inheritance, verified by cohabitation and public appearances. No loopholes." Molly's stomach dropped. A year. Their contract ended after her birthday. She glanced at Gabriel, expecting panic, but he looked calm. "We'll discuss it," he said, his hand brushing hers, a silent promise. Back at the reception they danced again, the weight of Hornsby's news hanging over them. Molly rested her head on Gabriel's chest, hearing his heartbeat, and murmured, "What do we do now?" He tilted her chin up, his eyes steady. "We figure it out. Together." His thumb grazed her jaw and she smiled, her heart full despite the uncertainty. As they swayed, the Davenports cheering, Molly realized she didn't care about the money as much as she cared about him. Gabriel, holding her close, felt the same, the contract a distant memory in the face of something real. Chapter 10: The Real Deal. Molly Davenport woke on her 30th birthday to sunlight streaming through her penthouse windows, her mural of a peacock now finished with a bold feather that screamed Gabriel Bennett's influence. Her emerald ring glinted as she stretched, but her mind was on the bombshell from last night's wedding. To secure the $50 million inheritance, she and Gabriel had to stay married for a year, complete with cohabitation and public appearances. The contract they'd signed, 47 pages of clauses about glitter bans and kale quotas, was meant to end today, but their kiss at the altar, real and electric, had changed everything. Molly, in her paint-splattered pajamas, felt a flutter that wasn't just birthday jitters. Gabriel was already in the kitchen, brewing coffee with the precision of a chemist. His tux from yesterday was replaced by a casual sweater, but his tie was still knotted perfectly, as if chaos might erupt without it. He handed her a mug, their fingers brushing, and her heart did that infuriating flip. "Happy birthday," he said, his hazel eyes softer than usual. "We need to talk about the will." Molly sighed, flopping onto a stool, her curls bouncing. "Gabe, I'm not sure I care about the money anymore. Last night when we kissed," she trailed off, cheeks warm. "That wasn't fake, was it?" He adjusted his glasses, a nervous tick, and looked at her like she was a legal brief he couldn't solve. "No," he said quietly. "It wasn't. But a year-long marriage is a significant amendment to our agreement." Molly grinned, sensing an opening. "Then let's make it real. No clauses, no spreadsheets, just us. What do you say, counselor? Wanna be my real husband?" Gabriel's jaw dropped, and for a moment he was speechless, a rarity. Then he laughed, a warm, unguarded sound that made her heart skip. "You're a hurricane, Molly Davenport. But, yeah, I'm in. On one condition: we rewrite the contract together." They spent the morning at her paint-splattered table, drafting a new agreement on a napkin, because Molly insisted paper was too formal. Their terms were gloriously absurd: mandatory Taco Tuesdays, Molly's win; no glitter pranks before coffee, Gabriel's compromise; and daily hugs, minimum 10 seconds, a joint effort. They bickered, laughing over her suggestion of weekly dance parties, and his insistence on scheduled laundry days. When their hands brushed over the napkin, neither pulled away and Molly's heart raced as Gabriel's fingers lingered. The real test came that afternoon at a Davenport family brunch, where Aunt Beatrice, in a floral dress that screamed, "I'm watching you," demanded an update on their marriage. Molly, in a sundress that matched her mural's vibrancy, leaned into Gabriel, who wore a blazer that somehow stayed crisp despite her proximity. "We're in it for the long haul," she said, squeezing his hand. Gabriel, catching her cue, stood and cleared his throat. "Molly's chaos drives me up the wall," he said, earning chuckles. "But it's also why I love her. She's taught me that life's better with a little mess." His eyes met hers and the room faded. "I'm not going anywhere." Beatrice's frown softened and even Cousin Mandy, waving her sage bundle, nodded approval. Molly's throat tightened and she tugged Gabriel down, whispering, "You're getting sappy, counselor." "Blame you," he murmured, his smile making her stomach flip. They moved into a new apartment the next week, a cozy loft that blended Molly's colorful art with Gabriel's minimalist bookshelves. The space was a compromise. Her peacock mural took one wall, his neatly labeled storage bins another. They bickered over paint swatches. Molly wanted lime green, Gabriel pushed for beige, but ended up with a soft teal that felt like them. One night as they unpacked, Molly found a box of Gabriel's old high school notes, including a doodle of her with gum in her hair, labeled Menace. "You kept this," she teased, waving it at him. He snatched it, ears pink. "Evidence of your crimes," he said, but he pulled her close, kissing her forehead. The kiss deepened and Molly's heart flipped, no contract needed. A year later the inheritance was secured, but the money felt secondary. Molly's art studio thrived, with workshops for kids funded by her fortune. Gabriel's pro bono legal clinic opened, helping families like his own had once needed. They celebrated with a taco truck outside the studio, Molly in a paint-splattered apron, Gabriel in a tie she'd loosened for him. Aunt Beatrice, begrudgingly impressed, toasted their real love, and even Uncle Ted's parrot Houdini squawked approval. That night, in their loft, Molly painted while Gabriel read beside her, their legs tangled on the couch. She flicked paint at him, a blue speck landing on his cheek, and he retaliated by stealing her brush, chasing her around the room. They collapsed, laughing, and he pulled her close, their rings glinting in the lamplight. "You're still a hurricane," he said, his voice warm. "And you're my anchor," she replied, kissing him. It was messy, real, and better than any clause they'd ever written. The book. 6 months later, Molly and Gabriel hosted a joint art show and legal clinic fundraiser, their loft packed with Davenports, artists, and clients. Molly's latest mural, a vibrant blend of their story with a peacock and a spreadsheet, hung proudly while Gabriel gave a speech about second chances, his arm around her. They still bickered. Molly over his obsession with alphabetized spices, Gabriel over her glitter explosions, but each argument ended in laughter and a kiss. As they danced under fairy lights, Molly whispered, "Best deal we ever made." Gabriel smiled, twirling her. No amendments needed. And as the crowd cheered, their love, once a contract, proved to be the realest thing of all.